Good morning, everybody. As some of you might know, I've made on occasion the remark that one of the worst trees in the entire video game is the Archmage Enhancement tree. It's basically a noob trap, a joke, and something that if you get started in the game and you're like, oh man, I want to play an Archmage, well, get pranked because it's terrible. Or at least, it was terrible. But Standing Stone Games made a couple changes to Archmage over the last few patches that made it substantially better. They did two things. First, they reduced the cost of the tree by like 17 points, which is a lot. That's huge. Almost everything in the tree that used to cost 2 points cost 1 now, which has a dramatic improvement on how the character feels. Now you can get spell points only for 1 point each instead of having to pay 3 or 2 for each one. So you're like, it's way less expensive and you get a lot more spell points in the early game. The reduced metamagic cost enhancements are much less expensive to take, so you can actually take them really early and then start using metamagics very quickly on your character. And then just to go along with that, they also improved some of the enhancements as well that were existing, which is the second part. They made several enhancements in the tree super juicy and much more interesting to take. As a baseline, you now get bonus to caster level and maximum caster level with every single spell in the game. For those of you that don't know exactly what that means more damage. All of your spells are just going to do about 10% more damage now, which is pretty cool. And 10% might not sound like a lot, but DDO is a game of like ones and twos. Every little bit adds up, and that might surprise you that sometimes the thing that makes and breaks a gigantic and powerful build is some of these very slight changes. But not only did they change to add some more damage, they changed up the two spell-like abilities Arcane Bolt and Arcane Blast. These are both abilities you get out of the Archmage tree that do force damage. Arcane Bolt is a single target, and Arcane Blast is like a fireball, but force. Now, both of these spells used to be very bad back in the day, because their damage wasn't very good, and they didn't scale off of any of your spell DCs. As a result, it just used your raw intelligence. And nowadays, a modern endgame character will have plus 50 to a spell DC of a certain type. That's right, plus 50 to your evocation spells, and even sometimes those won't land. So a spell that doesn't have any pluses adding into it is dead in the water. So Standing Stone Games rectified this by first bumping up the damage of both of these abilities so that they match with modern spell standards, which is very cool. And second, both of these abilities now use your highest spell school to determine the DC. That's right, the highest spell school. They don't use evocation or enchantment or illusion, they just figure out whichever one is your highest and use that. This means that Archmage is the perfect character to really focus in on one spell type. Because let's say you want to play a Transmutation Archmage or a Transmuter. If you decided to do this, you might think to yourself, man, I can turn things to stone, but then how will I actually slay them? And it turns out, now you can. Arcane Bolt and Arcane Blast will use your Transmutation DC, which makes pretty much every single wizard type in the entire game suddenly viable. These changes have made Archmage not the best thing in the game. Unfortunately, Alchemist, Druid, and Sorcerer are really insane and crazy, and it takes a lot to kind of catch up to them, but Archmage feels super duper comfortable for leveling, and in my opinion, pretty much feels better than actually going as full Pale Master. Now you're always going to want to go a little bit of Pale Master on your wizards, but the Archmage really provides that class fantasy now of being this generalist with a lot of different tools in the toolbox. The type of character where you straight up stop playing in between a quest to go to a tavern to swap out your spell list because you think you might have a better combination, which is something that pretty much never happens, but on Archmage, it actually feels pretty good to do. Now, the character you're seeing before your eyes is in fact an enchanter. I decided to go with enchantment because, well, I've never played an enchanter. I know that the top tier enchantment spell, Mass Hold Monster, is one of the best spells in Dungeons & Dragons Online, and has warped the entirety of the endgame metagame around it. Many design decisions have been made by Standing Stone Games to limit the power of Mass Hold Monster because of just how crazy, powerful, and versatile it is. But like there's other enchantment spells, right? And what I learned is that not really. There is like Hold Person, which is okay, and Hold Monster, and Auto Sphere of Dancing, but most of those spells don't feel as good when you realize for the same amount of spell points, you can just cast like Cone of Cold and instantly kill something. So generally, it didn't feel very good. Well, the enchantment side of things. But even though I was an enchanter, and multiple times I would shout enchantment as I would throw my spells at monsters, hoping that it would be more effective than just making them crowd controlled for a quarter second before they got killed by my teammates who were actually doing damage, my character was actually fully capable of holding its own, because Archmage just kind of beefs up all of your spells. So even though there were situations where the enchantment didn't feel that good, the Archmage on its own really came through and improved the damage of your abilities. Not just because I had access to Arcane Bolt and Arcane Blast, which were always just straight up good, Arcane Blast dealing a lot of additional damage, but also from the Wizard's ability Arcane Supremacy, which is their tier 5 in Archmage. What it does is it gives you a 10% chance whenever you hit a monster with a spell to gain a bunch of spell critical and spell critical damage. So your chance goes up, your damage goes up for a very short duration and short window, and when that happens, holy moly, Wizard feels like a burst machine. I was not an evocation wizard, but I felt like I was belting out spells like nobody could stand against me. And it was very satisfying. Obviously for a short duration, but still it felt very good. And then moving into the epics, well, I ran into the problem that it turns out none of the epic strikes actually use enchantment, so enchanters don't really do a whole lot. So Mass Hold Monster, still amazing. And then I just took a bunch of AoEs from Macrotech and called it a day. And it turns out it actually worked pretty good, because again, Mass Hold Monster there's a reason why it warped the entire game around it. Once I got to level 17 and I could do that, there was literally nothing that could stand in my way, and it was hilarious. So for you guys, I decided to boil down an Archmage build for you, and you can find it in the description. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to explain it here in just a second. But before we get into it, I just want to let you know the build I'm including is an Illusionist build. I think that Illusionist is probably going to be the best type of Archmage. If you don't want to play an Illusionist, you can just make some tweaks to the build that I posted, because in it, you can just change stuff like Spell Focus Illusion to Spell Focus Evocation if you want to do Evocation or whatever spell type you want to do, change up the race and all that stuff. Just so you know, it is an Illusionist. I think that is probably the best way to go about it. I also didn't include Feydark Illusionist in the build, so it'll be available for free-to-play players or people that are just getting started. But if you happen to have access to Feydark Illusionist and you're an enchanter, not enchanter, an illusionist, there's literally no reason, actually an enchanter as well, there's no reason to avoid using Feydark Illusionist. It's way too good for Archmage, and you're going to find it useful in pretty much every single Archmage you're going to play because of the inherent synergy between all of the force damage that is present there. Anyways, that's enough from me, so I'm going to pass it over to me with the build. Now, while there are a lot of different ways to play Wizard, there's not that very many ways to build your Wizard, as they're all going to come out sort of similar, which is max out that intelligence. Pretty much every Wizard, regardless of whether you want to play an Archmage, a Palemaster, or an Eldritch Knight, is going to be doing this. That's kind of one of the key takeaways here. Constitution's a good secondary stat because you need hit points, and that's kind of pretty much it. You could maybe get away with some type of strength-based wizard, or maybe you need a little bit of dex if you're getting precision on a melee. But since we're playing Archmage, intelligence, constitution, nothing else super matters. As far as your skills go, because you're an intelligence-based character, you're going to get a lot of skills kind of for free. So in this case, you're going to want to use stuff like Spellcraft. Really good because it gives you spell power. I like having Search because since you have a lot of intelligence, you're able to find almost every secret door, which is nice when True Seeing stops working, which is convenient. I put points into Jump. You don't have to. This is just for your first life characters. I find Jump is nice for filling in the gaps when you just don't get enough Jump from the actual Jump spell, because it only gives you 30. Concentration, actually not important. I don't know why I put points into here. Haggle gives you more money. Balance is good for taking some single weapon fighting feats to gain some extra defense, and also just to pick you back up. And honestly, the more I look at this, the more I realize your skills don't super matter. UMD, Spellcraft, Heal if you're a negative caster, because this gives you extra negative spell power, and that's about it. Then do what you want. As far as the feats go, wizards obviously get a lot of extra bonus feats in the form of meta magic feats as well as some spell focus feats. As far as the meta magics, I think pretty much every single wizard is going to take Quicken, Maximize, and then usually Empower. I didn't on this build for specific reasons. And then Extend is also nice if you're playing as an undead, as that doubles the duration of your Death Aura spells, which is just very convenient. Also, Heighten is good if you're playing a character that is going to be casting lower level spells. So where you would need Heighten is, for example, on an Illusionist, you would want Heighten. I'm playing an Enchanter here, so I want Heighten. You don't really need Heighten if you're playing as an Evoker. So if you're doing all the Evocation, you probably don't need Heighten that much. Although it can be very nice for some of your spell-like abilities, so I would go back and forth on that. Actually, you know what? I think Heighten's probably essential on a Wizard since you get the extra feats. I'm going to change my mind on that. As far as the individual spellcasting feats, though, you want to have spell focus wherever your main spell type is. I'm an enchanter here, but if you're evocation, you want to take evoker or illusionist or whatever. And then I have spell penetration here as well, because sometimes you just need a little bit of extra spell penetration, which is very good for leveling. If you have past lives, I believe you can get 12 spell penetration from past lives, which is a gigantic number. If you don't have any past lives, you kind of need these feats, so keep that in mind. As far as the Epic and Destiny feats go, for the Epic feats, Embolden Spell, Intensify Spell, getting those extra meta magics are pretty nice, as well as taking Wellspring of Knowledge and Wellspring of Power and Master of Knowledge. Now, Master of Knowledge is a pretty essential feat here. It kind of works with your Arcane Bolt and your Arcane Blast, which are two abilities you get out of Archmage, and it's one of the reasons why Archmage can just feel good throughout the endgame, even if you're not necessarily a pure damage-based character, because Arcane Bolt and Arcane Blast are nice while leveling. So you're able to pick up like a little bit of extra damage here and there, and Arcane Blast especially is really going to carry you through since it uses the highest of any of your spell DCs. So even though my character is an enchanter, it doesn't matter, this is damage based off of enchantment, which is cool. However, with the Master of Knowledge feat, which is kind of one of the crux of this build, how it works, it's that it gives you extra spell power and spell critical damage that stacks every time you hit a target with either of these spells. So if you Arcane Blast into a group of 5 monsters, you get 5 stacks of the buff, gaining an additional, it's like 3 spell power, so 15 spell power right away. And that's going to keep going up, stacking up to 30 times, giving you a total of 90 additional spell power, which is a lot. Especially considering, as an Archmage, you get 1 point of spell power for every point you actually put into the tree. So I'm getting 41 spell power here. The capstone gives you 20 spell power and 5 spellcraft, so that's already like almost like 70 spell power right there. And then on top of that, you can pick up extra spell power from Traditionalist Caster, and then you get access to Arcane Supremacy, which gives you spell critical chance and damage. So overall, you're able to pick up a pretty good amount of additional spell power here, and that's kind of one of the big features of this build. Now, whether you should go with Intensify and Embolden, or just go with Ruin and Greater Ruin is going to depend on your build, so that's kind of important. As far as the spells go, a lot of people ask what damage spells you should use as Wizard, and the answer is all of them. You should take a lot of different damage spells during the leveling process. So, if you're lower level, you want to take like Scorch and Snowball Swarm. You want to take Fireball and Lightning Bolt. You want to take Cone of Cold and Ball Lightning. And just try to use something that gives you general spell power. Every single wizard is going to need some evocation during the leveling process, so having an evocation item will be nice just to help you get through it. But if you're an enchanter like myself, you don't get really any spells until you get Massive Monster, because every spell feels bad by comparison. But if you're an illusionist, you get Phantasmal Killer starting at level 7, and you can start instantly killing people, which is pretty cool. And if you're an evoker, again, you just kind of blast off the entire process. As far as the enhancements go, the way I kind of break this down is that this stuff right here, Improved Maximize and Improved Quicken, is crazy. It feels so good. For only 3 points and 3 points, you're able to reduce the cost of all Quicken spells by 4, and all Maximize spells by 9. It's one of the reasons why I take both of these things at the beginning. By reducing the cost of Maximize by 9, it actually means that pretty early on, like once you get Fireball, you're able to actually maximize your Fireball, and it deals more than double the damage for not more than double the cost, which makes it a lot more efficient, especially considering there might be situations where you need to cast 2 or 3 Fireballs, whereas here you're not going to have to do that. So it is very convenient. I do like taking Improved Maximizing here. Also, during the leveling process, I didn't take any of the critical in here. I kind of skipped that. I went with the extra spell points, the extra spell power, and I went with the Improved Maximize and the Improved Quicken over here as soon as I could get it. I also got the Pale Master pretty quick. I took this around level 7. I like to stay in your regular form, usually for a little bit, although you can buy negative potions if you want from the House Durasco potion vendor. They will sell you Inflict Wounds potions, but it's going to depend on how you feel about it. But yeah, I went for the Improved Maximizing and stuff first, and then I came in, picked up Shroud of the Lich, and then I kind of filled up the Archmage tree, then filled out what I've got here in Pale Master, and did the Eldritch Light a little bit later. As far as Feydark Illusionist goes, if you own Feydark Illusionist, it's basically amazing for every spellcaster. The build that I'm including here for you to follow is going to be an Illusionist, so it will be based off of Illusion, because I think that Illusion is probably the most convincing way to play an Archmage right now, but it does not include the Feydark Illusionist tree, because not everybody's going to own it. So if you're free to play, you won't own this tree, so the build is accommodating that and will have how you should spend your points if you don't own Feydark Illusionist. But if you do, this tree is really good for an illusionist, getting you access to Shadow Blade, Fan of Shadow Blades, Arcane Bolt, and Arcane Blast, all as illusion spells, basically allowing you to deal a fair amount of damage during the entire leveling process, and it's really, really strong. So generally, it's going to feel pretty good, but if you don't own this, don't worry about it. But as I've said before 100 times, Fade Illusionist, Greater Color Spray, one of the best things in the game, so definitely something you want to consider using. The only reason I didn't use it on this build is because I told myself, I'm going to be an enchanter, and I'm going to be enchanting everything throughout the entire game. And what I realized very quickly is that enchantment is staggeringly bad for the leveling process because almost every spell you get is bad or not good or useless. Like, Charm Monster is kind of okay, and you might be like, oh, but why would Charm be bad? And it's mostly because if you charm a monster, I play a lot of Reaper mode. In Reaper mode, charmed monsters lose their Reaper powers, so they just get bodied by monsters nearby. And also, a lot of newer quest design from SSG is kill all the monsters. So if you charm something, there's going to be one or two monsters that are just like hangers-on that, unfortunately, you still have to kill at the end of the day. So you have to walk up to them, use cancel charm, and then you can start killing them so you can get to the next door. And it's just faster not to, especially considering as an enchanter, you can just like mass enchant things. Although I did have a lot of fun debuffing monsters and other stuff. As far as the epic destinies go, I feel like you have a lot of flexibility as a wizard in general. If you're an illusionist, Shadow Dancer is a great option to get access to weird, as well as some of the additional force damage scaling from stuff like First Blood. Also, if you're an illusionist, you can still use Draconic Incarnation or an Evoker, because you're able to get access to the, not only the Damage Mantle, but also the Dragon Breath, which is going to be fairly powerful and scaling off your Evocation, and Ruin and Greater Ruin, which don't have any DC on them and do like 1 billion damage. That's obviously an option right there. Primal Avatar is also a reasonable consideration, which is something you can think about. And if you're an Evocation, or actually even an Illusion-based character, you can still consider Magus of the Eclipse, because Magus of the Eclipse is quite nice, giving you access to Time Stop, but also bonus Fear DCs as an Illusionist. Now here, I'm using Macrotech. Now for me, I think that Tunken's Lightning Hammer here is very, very good. Lightning and Thunder Hammer, both of these spells are fantastic. They just have no save, so on characters that have a little bit less damage, these are perfectly fine pickups. Every 10 seconds, you just kind of blow up everything in front of you, which is nice. As far as going up to the top, you have a lot of flexibility. You could definitely do that in this tree, especially considering this ability here, Maximum Overdrive. I actually think is quite good because it does give you 50% reduction in spell cooldowns. So if you're playing as an illusionist, you could consider doing this and just start blasting out like instant kills like crazy as an option, or go for more damage. But again, I haven't tested this myself, so it's hard to say. I'm going to be playing a Macrotech build soon, so I can get a feel for Maximum Overdrive. But for now, I'm just going to let you know it's an option. Because I'm playing as an enchanter, I went Fatesinger, because this is the only thing in Epic Destinies that like uses enchantment that's kind of good. So we went with Cut the Strings, and I mean, it was fine. For the most part, most of my damage came from spamming Galvanic Blast and Tonkin's Lightning Hammer that both don't have a save on them, so I didn't have to worry about having Evocation DCs, and then attune the Arcane with the upgrade Inevitable, so I was doing damage again with no saving throw. If you're playing a character that doesn't deal a lot of damage directly, or you don't have the tools to deal damage because you don't have the right DCs or whatever, that is where you're going to want to get the extra bonus, or get abilities that don't deal with saves, so you can kind of skip your way past that. As far as equipment goes, for the most part, apparently I took off a bunch of equipment already. For the most part, you're just looking for intelligence items, negative spell power items, illusion-focused items, or whatever your spell DC happens to be for the type of wizard you want to be. There's no like distinction where you choose specifically. I'm just saying Evoker and Illusionist to kind of put the idea in your head. If you wanted to, you could just be a generalist and not focus on anything, which is perfectly fine for the leveling process. Very bad for endgame because you won't have enough stats to actually do anything, so it's something to keep in mind. But yeah, look for general spell power items. If you can go into like Ravenloft, I don't know if I still have one. But yeah, like stuff like the Queen's Scepter from Feywild that gives you potency, insightful potency, spell sight, insightful spell sight. This covers pretty much every single spell power you could possibly need. Something like that is very convenient. Getting things that have just bonuses to general spell DCs, like the Wintercourt Necklace here, giving Profane Spell Focus, so it gives bonus to all of your spell DCs. Stuff like that can be kind of good. If you happen to have access to Ganeth Crafting, I would definitely recommend Goggles, because you can make, like this one, Charming of Insightful Enchantment, so that's Enchantment Focus, Insightful Enchantment Focus, as well as Insightful Intelligence as well, so it's all kind of stacking there. So at level 10, this character can get extra +5 enchantment DCs. If you're Illusionist, you could do Illusion and Insightful Illusion. If you're an Evocation or an Evoker, evocation, insightful evocation. So you have a lot of flexibility there in terms of exactly how you want to go about and do that. But as I said, it's going to be the same standard thing. Get the spell powers you need for the spells you currently have or you're using the most often. Get some defense like false life, physical sheltering, negative amplification because you kind of need that, and intelligence and spell DCs. That's pretty much all you need. As I said, the build that I linked below is going to be a illusion build, so it's going to be mostly designed for people who happen to be illusionists. But you can, again, do some tweaks by just changing up a couple of the feats. So where I took Spell Focus Illusion, just change that into something else and you could go with it. As far as which Archmage specializations, I guess you could call it, are viable, of all of them, the best one, in my opinion, is probably Illusion, with Evocation being a close second. Then after that, I would probably put Conjuration, then Enchantment, and then, what are the other two? Transmutation and Abjuration. Transmutation and Abjuration are just straight up bad. There's no reason to use either of them. The only reason I could imagine you would use Transmutation is because you could use Mass Frog out of Primal Avatar if you focused all in on Transmutation, and I guess Flesh to Stone. But like that's not really a build, because there's a lot of things that aren't made of flesh that you can't turn to stone, unfortunately, in DDO. So it's not the best spell in the world. And Abjuration has like the dismissal spells, but also dismissal doesn't work when you're on a creature's native plane. So all those quests that take place in Shavrath, you can't really dismiss anything, which is unfortunate. So because that's where they live. Or at least they're supposed to be like that. I don't know if the new quests do that. As I will admit, I don't cast dismissal. But yeah, so that's kind of how I would kind of rank them. Illusion is definitely going to be your best bet. Overall, the Archmage tree is dramatically more powerful than it was before, and you're going to find a lot of good use out of stuff like Arcane Bolt and Arcane Blast to really carry you through the leveling process. But if you want to get even more levels with different types of builds, make sure you subscribe so you get access to... Well, it's not really get access because everyone has access because it's free, because this is YouTube and you can do that for free. But make sure you check it out, the channel, subscribe if you want to see more content like what you're seeing right now. Additionally, 2 fun facts. Did you know that I stream on twitch.tv? That's right. That's like my actual job. I stream on twitch.tv and I make DDO content, and that's where I kind of put all the build ideas together and get a lot of bad ideas from viewers to put into characters, so that's always fun. On top of that, if you don't want to watch live content, but you'd rather watch that content later, you might not know, I actually have a VODs channel for the live stream. So I'll put a link to it in the description. It's called Streams, and it's where I take all of the Twitch VODs and I upload them there directly. Twitch has actually changed the contract, so now anybody can stream on both platforms at the same time, which I'd like to do, but I currently have a hardware problem that's limiting my ability to do that, and it would make it convenient because then I wouldn't have to like upload the VODs and like type in all the information and data and stuff. It would just go there automatically. But I digress. If you want to check that out, if you don't like Twitch and you want to watch on YouTube, streams in the description. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you for watching. Next video is going to be about Fighter Tank, so I hope you're excited for that. Bye-bye.